Um, I'd like to get started so that Andreas can jump right in. Welcome everyone to our Cardinal Strong Wellness Series. This evening, we'd like to welcome back Dr. Andreas Stamatis. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Dr. Stamatis is a professor in our Exercise and Nutrition Science Department with an expertise in sports psychology and more specifically, mental toughness. Andreas has worked with elite athletes nationally and internationally and has agreed to guide you all through a session in psychological skills training. This is one of several sessions. Please welcome back Dr. Andreas Stamatis.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Good afternoon, everybody. So this is the second session, and I'm gonna share my screen, hopefully. Can you see it? All right, excellent. All right. So today is the second session for me, and as you can see, in general, we're gonna try to improve performance via psychological skills training. Today, we're talking specifically about optimism or optimistic style and emotion regulation. I'm gonna start and recap a little bit for the ones that weren't present or didn't get online for the first one. And then we're gonna move along, okay? So as you can see, these are the seminars, the 6 seminars that I'm gonna lead. You can see we're going from the left to the right. We did already the first one in December. On the left side, you can read again, if you haven't already, what's our objective and what we're trying to accomplish with all this. We have already done session 1. Okay, and today we're gonna do session 2. We're gonna have another one in February, the 4th one in March, and the 2 last ones in April. So the first one was about talking about psychological skills training in general, and we did a little bit of introduction to mental toughness. Today, we're gonna talk about the 2 out of the 8 key dimensions of mental toughness, which are optimistic style and emotion regulation. So 3 big parts for today. This is our agenda. We're gonna ask you to, we're gonna collect some data. So first of all, what we're gonna do before I even start, I would like you to, there's already a link in the chat room that Lisa has shared. I want you to go there when we tell you. If you haven't participated already, you have to put your demographics. If you have, don't do it again. Okay, if you have already submitted your demographics when we did the first session, you don't have to do it again. We already have that. Yes, Anna. Do you have a question? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know what that is, that line. Anyway, so then we're going to ask you, after you submit your demographics or not, to rate your knowledge of optimism and emotion. So 2 questions, 1 out of 7, from 1 to 7, and then 2 more questions to assess your level of optimism and emotion regulation. That's all you need to do. Then I'm going to follow up this with the seminar, and then at the end we're going to do some assessments. The first part of the assessment will take you up to 5 minutes. You have already done the demographics once. It will take you 2 minutes. Don't forget that here we have, so Lisa has already shared the link. Use that link. And when it asks you for a code, put the first letter of your first name. So for me, it will be Alpha, A, Andreas. Then the last 4 digits of your cell phone number. For me, will be 3477. And then the last thing you have to add is your first letter of your last name. So for me, it would be S for Stamatis. And that's one way for me to, for us to see when you're submitting your answers, so we can match your answers from the first session to the second session, to your third session, and so on. So if we're ready, Lisa and Brian, we can go ahead and click on that link that you see in the chat room, and we'll wait for you to come back. When you're ready, we'll give you 5 minutes. Okay, all right. So click on the first link, the link that they sent you. It's in the chat room, and go to Qualtrics. If you have already done the demographics, do not do it again. If you haven't, add your demographics. Don't forget the code. Then 2 questions about your knowledge and 2 questions about your levels. That's it. See you in 5 minutes. All right. So assuming we're done with this, I'm going to move on with the seminar on optimistic style and emotion regulation. We have prepared a lot of good stuff for you guys, so I'm excited. So let's start. This is something that we talked about last time, and this is a definition of mental toughness, right? It's a personal capacity to produce consistently high levels of subjective or objective performance despite any significant adversities. And as we said before, mental toughness consists of 8 key dimensions, and you can see all 8 of them over there. Today, we're talking about optimistic style and emotion regulation. This is a slide that shows the same information, but it's prettier. Okay, you see mental toughness, you see the 8 key dimensions up top, and you see the definitions all the way to the bottom. Okay, so today, again, optimistic style and emotion regulation. All right, so you ready? Okay, so this is what we're going to cover today. 5 things about optimistic style and 5 things about emotion regulation. So concerning optimistic style, what is it? If we can learn it, if optimists are better than pessimists, what is the explanatory style and why do we care about it? And if being overly optimistic is the thing. Okay, can you be too optimistic? So I'll start with that, and then we'll talk about emotion regulation. All right, I'm gonna talk about optimistic style, and in order to do that, I'm gonna share a story, which is a true story, okay? So we're gonna talk about a male collegiate hockey player. We're gonna name him Liam. So Liam showed up at my office one day, and he said, I heard you into sports psych. I would like to talk to you. So I didn't know Liam before. So I said, okay, yeah, I can help you. I just don't have time right now. Would you be able to visit with me tomorrow? So he said, sure. So we set up a meeting for 2 o'clock the next day, and he came. And during the first session, I asked him a couple of questions, but I let him talk a lot. So Liam was recruited as a very good hockey player. However, he had some issues, and he was trying to tell me that he was pretty good in practices, but not so good in the games. And that started becoming a problem, and then it became even a bigger problem, up to the point that he wouldn't start anymore. A key now feature in this story is his father. His father really believed in him, and his father was really disappointed with his performance. So Liam was very desperate, not only because he wasn't playing well enough, but also because he was disappointing his father. And as you can see over there, his disappointment had some kind of transferability to other parts of his life. And he was trying to tell me that he was feeling hopeless. And hopelessness in optimistic style is really important. So at the end of the session, I heard his story. I proposed if he would like to self-assess, to assess himself in mental toughness. He said yes. So I gave him the mental toughness index, MTI, which you can see on your right-hand side of the slide. Okay, so there are 8 questions from 1 to 7, and he assessed himself. And that was the end of session 1. Then he came back. I took MTI. I combined all the information I had. I took this course. When he came in, I explained this course that he had. And because optimistic style was one of his weaknesses, we agreed that we should talk about optimism and optimistic style first. So optimism, as you can see, is in general expecting good outcomes in your life. And although that sounds very simple or expected, not all people are that way. So I want you to think about teammates or people in your family, right? Some people in general or on average think that things will go their way, and some people not. Okay, so in that very simplistic way, we have the optimists and we have the pessimists. And I'm sure you can think about people in your life or even yourselves if you're optimists and pessimists. Now, I would like somebody to help me with this. Is any coach available to help me out? Anybody? Or Lisa, somebody?
I'll go ahead.
I'll help.
Is that Julia?
Yeah.
Thanks, Julia. So I'll do A, which is Andreas, and you play Liam. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So this is a dialogue we had. It's only like 2 slides, and it's very, very close to the actual dialogue. So Liam, let's say you missed a shot in the beginning of your next game. You can start thinking that you suck, you shouldn't be there, you're not a good player, you don't deserve to play at all, or you can just, move to the next play and do your best. What would you pick?
Well, I know what's right in a way to just forget about it and move on, but I just can't challenge those automatic negative thoughts. I feel so incapable of changing the circumstances. I've experienced these feelings of helplessness too many times,
Okay, and one comment before we move on, thank you, Julia, is that he mentioned 2 things that were really important to me. He said automatic negative thoughts. Negative thoughts is a big issue with pessimists, and they just show up, okay? And also that helplessness again. Okay, he mentioned helplessness again. Right, Julia, one more slide. All right, Liam, let me ask you this then. Do you believe that whatever thoughts you have after a missed shot will influence what you do next?
Yes, I've noticed that repeatedly. I just can't stop that negative fulfilling prophecy kind of process, I guess.
Thanks, Julia, that was it. So here, what is really important is that pessimists on average have that negative fulfilling prophecy. So when they start doing something, they think they will fail. So in a weird and twisted way, they want to fail. So at the end, they can say, I knew it. I knew it. I wasn't going to make it. I'm not good enough. Okay. So I had to try and educate Liam on optimism and pessimism, which is something that is very similar to what we're doing today. So why do we think that optimists are better? Okay, in general or on average, they achieve more, they have better health status, and they enjoy their lives more. Pessimists are exactly the opposite. The good thing here is that optimism is a set of skills. And as a set of skills, it can be learned as long as you practice it every day. Okay? So how can we do it? That's the key question. How can we move from pessimism to optimism? It's not easy, but it is something that we can be done. The answer to that question is the explanatory style that we have. So the explanatory style, we usually call it the 3 Ps. Okay? So Do you think that what happened to you is permanent? For example, Liam would say, you know, I'll never make that shot. That's permanent. Okay. Do you think it's pervasive? So if you don't do well in that game, you know, or if you miss a shot, you won't play well for the whole game. Or if you don't play well for the whole game, that will just spill over to you being a bad student or a bad son or a bad boyfriend or a bad friend. Okay. And the third P is personal. You always take it personally. It's always your fault, right? It's never the past. Maybe the past wasn't good enough. Okay. You take everything internally. So here, in order to change from pessimism to optimism, we have to change the style we explain things that happen to us. Okay, negative things or challenging things. So we have permanent, pervasive, and personal. Now, what we need to understand here is that the way we explain the events that happen in our lives will influence our reactions to them. And that's very important. And I'm going to use a everyday life example. I'm going to use examples from sports, but also everyday life, because these are skills that we can just transfer from sports to real life and from real life to sports. Let's say you have a flat tire. Okay, you have a flat tire. You can just start cussing out and being upset and trying to understand why this has happened to you and just waste more time, because that's how you explained it. Or you can just say, okay, it's a flat tire. I'm going to change the tire. I'm going to move on. No big deal. Same event, different perception. Different perception, different action. So, and that action affects your life. And we're going to see that in a little bit. Okay. So, what we say here is use disputation. When you have those negative thoughts, challenge them again and again and again, because most of the time, those negative beliefs are just distortions. They're just in our heads. They don't exist. Okay. One more thing I want to say here. There is a thing that's called, so if you are over optimistic, it is not a good thing. Okay. Because if you have extremely high levels of optimism, you can have a lot of problems. It can be catastrophic, actually. Right. So let me give you an example. You've been on a plane, right? You know the pilot. There's a pre-flight check, and they check everything. After they check everything and everything is great, then they can be optimistic that the flight will go smoothly. They just don't leave without fuel. And they're like, it's going to be fine. We're going to make it. Okay. That's over optimism. Over optimism may be catastrophic again, may create a lot of problems. So as an athlete, you do all the prep. You go to practice, you practice intentionally, you eat accordingly, you hydrate accordingly, you sleep accordingly, and then you're optimistic about the result. You just don't show up and be like, we're going to win. It doesn't work like that. Okay. So I created this slide to put everything together. You see Liam, so he's right here, right? And the pessimist will say, we'll take it personally, as we said. So we just put all the three P's together. That's the explanatory style. Right? The pessimist, Liam, will say, I'm responsible, I missed a shot. The optimist may say, the past wasn't that good. That's why I missed it. The pessimist will say, I'll never be good enough. The optimist will say, well, okay, I missed this one. I'll get the next one. The pessimist will say, I didn't play well. I'll be really bad at school as well. I'm not going to be good at anything. The optimist will say, okay, I didn't play well, but I'm still a great son to my father. I'm still a great student. I'm still a great friend. Okay. So hopefully you see those two different things. At any point you have any questions or you want to say something, feel free. Okay. We can make it as interactive as you want. So what happened with Liam? So as I'm finishing up the story, We didn't meet a lot of times after this because of our schedules were different. But in one of our last meetings, we created those 3 phrases, and the athlete or the client has to agree on the wording as well. That's really important, that he can tell himself whenever there are unsuccessful plays, right? So whenever he'd miss a shot, he would say, not me, next time, still a great son. And that was very efficient according to emails I received later, because that really helped him challenge the negative thoughts, stop those negative thoughts, and replace them with this kind of thoughts. Okay, so now it wasn't personal anymore, it wasn't permanent anymore, and it wasn't pervasive anymore. Okay, one thing I want to say, because there is a big debate, a lot of people say, you know, optimists are just selfish people, they never take responsibility, and I'm not a pessimist, I'm just a realist. That could be true in some cases, but this is not the point here. The point here is to understand that being optimistic is about learning to talk to yourself in a positive way during or after personal defeats. Okay, and I want you to remember that. These are the take-home points for optimism. Optimistic style is the tendency to expect positive events in the future and attribute positive causes and outcomes to different events in one's life. Optimism as a strategy of how we interpret adversity in the world can be learned and taught. On average, optimists lead healthier lives and exhibit higher motivation and career success. The explanatory style, the 3 Ps, permanent, personal, and pervasive, is central to what differentiates the optimist from the pessimist. Use disputation daily. So whenever you have negative thoughts, dispute them, challenge them. Our explanatory style affects how we filter the world, which affects our actions. And being over-optimistic is unhealthy and potentially dangerous. Does anybody have any questions before I move into the second part of this seminar, emotion regulation? If there's something in the chat room and I can't see it, please let me know. Any questions for me? If anybody has questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
All right. What's the difference between taking accountability, like taking responsibility for something on the field without being pessimistic about it?
Okay. That's a very good question. So that has to do with, there are layers to it. Okay. A pessimist is, it is not about responsibility. It's about allowing those negative thoughts to take you down that vortex. You can take responsibility, but you can have positive thoughts about what's coming next. So it's not, responsibility is not something that only pessimists do. No, not at all. That's a misconception. Both pessimists and both optimists can take responsibility. It's the self-talk that they're doing. It's the self-talk. If you're trying to talk down, if you're trying to take down yourself by those negative thoughts, that's not productive. That's not something that's efficient. So you can take responsibility, but it doesn't mean you're not optimistic about the future. The pessimist may or may not take responsibility, but they're not pessimists, they're not optimists about the future, optimistic. Did I answer the question or not? So the point again is not who's taking responsibility. That's what I'm trying to do. It's not who's selfish and who's not. It's about what's going on in here. How do you talk to yourself? Any other questions? Okay. Let's talk about emotion regulation, the second key component of mental toughness. Okay, we're going to explain what is affect, why is self-regulation of affective states important, if emotion and mood are the same, should we regulate our emotions, and what's the process, the goals, and the strategies of emotional response. All right, let me ask you some questions. All right, have you ever thrown the ball toward the bleachers when you were angry at your coach? Have you imagined there's nobody in the gym when you're about to shot that critical free throw? Have you ever anticipated going to do yoga in the evening to re-energize yourself midday? Have you ever hit the weights after a heated argument? Have you walked away from the TV while you were watching a game just to cool down? If you answer yes to any of those questions, you have already participated in emotion regulatory activities. All right, so why do we care about regulating ourselves when we talk about affective states? Well, lately, there's a big research interest in that, especially when the conditions are challenging. And there's a huge interest because the people who do that, the people who have a high ability to do that, they're happier, they interact better with other people, and they have higher self-satisfaction. So self-regulation of affective states is very important, as you can see. I created this slide to explain a little bit what is affect. Affect, as you can see, it's on the left. It's an umbrella for all these states, stress, emotion, mood, and all these states, affective states, have to do, in a very simplistic way, let's put it, have to do with discriminating between bad and good. Okay, so have good choices and bad choices. When we're trying to deal with stress, we call it coping. When we try to deal with emotion, we call it emotion regulation. And while we try to deal with mood, we talk about mood regulation. All right. What is emotion? Emotion is not mood. Emotion is not stress. When we talk about stress, we usually talk about something negative, right? Emotions, though, as you can see those examples in the parenthesis, they can both be positive and negative, right? And also, although I didn't put it there, when we are trying to see if something is, an emotion is positive and negative, we also talk about intensity, duration, and frequency of those emotions. So a lot of people think that mood and emotion are the same, and it makes kind of sense if you think that they share some common ground. So as you can see, there are commonalities in experience, expression, and physiology. Experience means that they are sensed by the person who says something about a mood or an emotion. The expression, we have facial expressions where the tone of voice changes, gait is changing, and physiology, heart rate is going up, may go down, we have release of energy, and we also secrete hormones. So these three happen in both. However, and I created this table to make it clearer. However, mood and emotion are very different. And they're different, as you can see on the left column, when we talk about duration and intensity, the emotion is shorter and is more intense. The mood is longer and less intense. Think about sometimes you will say, I'm in the mood of this or that, or I feel like that. And when you say I feel like that, it's more emotion. When you're in the mood for something, we talk about moods, right? We'll talk about time. The time course of emotion is distinct. You know when it started, you know when it peaked, you know when it stopped. Mood, not so much. It builds up gradually. Why it happened and what is it about? When we talk about emotions, it's pretty distinct. This happened and that's why, right? When we talk about mood, sometimes you don't even know why, right? Sometimes people ask you, why are you like this? And I'm like, I don't know. Just woke up like this. I don't know. And then talking about information and when it's coming from, emotion usually something happened in the external environment. Mood is something that happened in the internal environment. So maybe you started thinking about something and gradually build up to a mood for that day. Okay, so hopefully this table helps you understand that although mood and emotion share some common ground, they're very, very different. And today we're talking about emotions. We're talking about emotion regulation. All right, why do we even care? Why do we need it? Well, we have plenty of emotions, right? And whatever emotion it is, positive or negative, it can be used in a useful way, but also it can be hurtful. Last time we talked about a player, that basketball player that couldn't control his emotions and he tensed up too much, missing the 2 free throws, right? So that's hurtful. Useful, let's say you feel joy or you feel appreciation being there and playing golf, and that helps you optimize all the information that's coming from all over the place and the shot. So whatever emotion you have, we can use it in a useful way, but also it can be used in a hurtful way. And that's important. Why? Because when it's becoming hurtful, we can and we should regulate it. Okay? Now, that small picture there, it's a part of a bigger picture that I'm going to show you in a little bit. When do we need to have a process of emotional responding? So first of all, the situation has to be relevant to you. Okay? So if you hear a very simplistic example about an earthquake in China, you may not care. If you hear about an earthquake in the US, you care. So the more relevant it is for you, the higher the probability of you respond. Okay? That's one situation, as you can see. 2 is attention. Does that require some attention from you? If it does, great. If it doesn't, no. If it does, though, you have to assess it. Positive, negative, however you're going to assess it. And after you assess it, you respond. So the process is situation, attention, appraisal, response. And as you can see, there is an arrow looping back. So it's a closed loop system, as we say in psychology. So whatever response you have, it goes back to the situation. So your response changes the whole situation. Remember the flat tire, right? If your response is like, okay, let's change it, move on. Different. That's a different kind of feedback to the situation compared to you getting angry and upset. Your heart rate is going up. That will affect the situation way differently. So it's a dynamic process and it has 4 steps. Okay. I'll use an example. I'll use Emma, the boxer. Who would like to read the first paragraph? Who would like to help me? Anybody from the coaches or staff? Just to read, which is the very first paragraph about Emma. I don't have a great accent, but maybe some of you have a better one. So maybe we can.
I'll read it. If nobody else wants to read. You want me to read the first part? Sorry.
Yeah, the very first paragraph.
Okay. Imagine Emma during a fight against an angry opponent. After a couple of minutes during the first round, Emma gets punched in the face with the uppercut. She starts bleeding from her left eyebrow. Emma touches her eyebrow, sees the blood on her glove, starts screaming, and she is just about to launch an attack. That unexpected emotional response changes the interpersonal situation. This new situation gives now a rise to a new response by the opponent. The opponent no longer feels angry, but surprised and scared.
Thank you, Joey. So that goes back to this. So the way you respond to the situation changes the whole situation. So here, Emma, she just got punched in the face. She sees the blood. She can just go all the way and quit. She can be scared. She can be anything. However, that thing that happened, that her seeing the blood, make him scream and make her just make up your mind that this is the time for me to just, that enough is enough. I'm hitting back. The boxer that hit Emma wasn't expecting that. So that unexpected change in your emotional response, change the whole situation. So that's the key idea here. However you respond to anything that happens during a game, practice, or life, pretty much affects the whole situation, which means your life in other people's lives around you. So the response is really important. Okay, remember that you have the power to change the situation. If you can regulate your emotion, you can change the whole game. And by game, I mean a game or your whole life. Okay, so you have the power. We all have the power. And this is a skill we can learn. So what's the goal when we regulate our emotions? Most people will say decrease negative, increase positive. Yes? Yes. Let me ask you this though. And when I first started reading about emotion regulation, I had never thought about it. So let me ask you this. Have you ever tried to employ more empathy, that's just an example, in your effort to consolidate your devastated teammate who lost that penalty kick? Have you ever tried to suppress your excitement that you're pulling off an important win until the very end of the game? These are two examples that you actually, the first one, what is it? It's an example, you trying to increase negative emotions. And the second example is you trying to decrease positive emotions. That's why we say that more positive and less negative is not always the case. It's like, I'm going to give a weird example, but it's like you going to a funeral and your cousin says a joke, but you don't want to laugh. That would be decreasing positive emotions because you can't do it there, right? So sometimes it's not, when we say regulating emotions, it's not just decreasing negative and or increasing positive. It can be the other way around. Okay? Good. So, big question. How can we do it? And that's the last part for today. How can we do it? What time it is? Okay, we're good. So, we are trying, when we're working with athletes, right, to achieve that flexible and skillful emotional response. How do we do that? So, there are 5 families of strategies, and I'll give some examples. Situation selection, situation modification, attentional deployment, cognitive change, and response modulation. A lot of terminology. Let me break it down. Situation selection, the very first one, right? It says being proactive in order to end up or not end up in a situation that is expected to give rise to welcome or unwelcome emotions. So you lost the game, you know, next day your coach is going to be angry and maybe yell at you. So you're trying to avoid that. If you avoid that, you avoid the whole situation. So you picked the situation you're going to put yourselves in. And by doing that, you're not going to have those negative emotions, right? So the very first thing we can do is be proactive and pick the situation we're putting ourselves in. So if you know a situation is going to create negative emotions and you can avoid it, avoid it. Okay? Situation modification. Now, we're trying to change the whole thing directly. Why? Trying to modify that emotional effect. So you want to go to practice, it's Plattsburgh, you didn't expect it, it snowed too much, your car didn't start, oh my God, what am I going to do? I can't be late for practice, right? So how can we modify that? Your roommate, who's a great person, driving you to practice, end of the story, nothing negative, all positive, all good. That was a situation modification. And after you modified it, the emotional effect was modified, we're good. Third thing, now we're trying to direct the focus, we direct the attention to something else in order to, again, influence our emotions. We're losing. It's halftime, coach comes in, they're like, come on, guys, come on. We've done this before, we can do it again. Last week, we beat a way better team. What is going on today? Let's go, we can do it. I'm believing you, you have it inside. You remember what happened last week, right? So now we're focusing our attention, not that we're losing in the first half, but that we're great. We've done it before, so we can do it again. For us, a lot of times that's called distraction, which is good, right? But that's something that you can do yourselves as well, right? After losing a game or during halftime, you can distract, and by distracting your negative thoughts, what are you doing? You are shifting your attention to something else, which can influence your emotions in a positive way. So that's the third family of strategies. What's the fourth one? The fourth one is that's called cognitive change. So we're trying to change how you assess the situation, whatever happened or happening right now, to change the importance. How many times we've said, this loss is a great opportunity for us to learn. We didn't lose, we learned. Okay, what are we doing? We take the same situation and we appraise it differently. We call that reappraisal, right? And that's another great strategy to switch from negative to positive, or to regulate your emotions, let me put it better, in a more optimistic way, in a better way, in a more positive way. Okay, so a lot of times something happens to us. Let's say you missed your flight, right? You can just be really upset about it, be really angry about it, be really unhappy about it, or you can say, well, you know what? I guess it wasn't meant for me to catch this flight. Okay, I may pay $200 more, but these 2 extra days that I'm going to stay here, I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to do the best I can with what I have. And next time, I'll just start driving to the airport half an hour earlier. Okay, that's reappraisal. And the last thing is response modulation. So here we're trying to influence the response. So it has already happened. We're trying to influence the response directly. Okay, what can we do? We can just exercise. That may help us calm down, for example. We can use deep breathing. That's a relaxation technique. Or other people, and I'm not advising that, they use alcohol, drugs, or food to change how they feel. Okay, that's why it's called response modulation. And another example that we really study in this category, in this strategy, in this family of strategies, is called expressive suppression, is when people are trying to intentionally suppress the expression of either positive or negative emotions, okay? And sometimes they do it like by drinking alcohol, okay? All right, so I created this slide. I'll put everything up there. You see the 5 families of strategies, and then you see the 4 steps in the process of emotion regulation. If you have any questions, again, I'm right here. You can talk to me through the chat room, or if it's something personal, I'll give you my contact information at the very end, so please feel free to email me. These are the take-home points for emotion regulation. Self-regulation of affective states is related to overall life satisfaction, human social interaction, and global happiness. Emotion is not mood or stress. Sometimes emotions can and should be regulated. The process is situation, attention, appraisal, response, and then it goes back to the situation, okay? The 4 goals: decrease negative, increase positive, but also decrease positive or increase negative emotions. And the 5 strategies: situation selection, modification, attentional deployment, cognitive change, and response modulation. So any questions before we move any further about emotion regulation? We still have time, so please feel free. Anything.
Andreas, I think this goes more along the lines of more so the optimism part, but a lot of people or at least my team knows that I love John Gordon, and John Gordon is a, positive speaker. And I think about how he talks about energy vampires and trying to remove energy vampires and from situations, and whether it's for me, whether it's a coworker or it's or when I was on the track team, a teammate that just sucks the energy because they're so negative and they're such a pessimist, and how you can really change things around when you take a more optimistic approach. And hopefully some of our athletes are thinking about that, of who the energy vampires might be, and ways that maybe you can help yourself not become an energy vampire, as well as trying to help those people think in a more positive light and what they can do to be leaders on their team.
Yeah, definitely, coach. That goes with the optimism, as you said, the optimistic style. Yeah, it is time for all of us to think the effect we have on ourselves and others. One more thing I thought about while you were talking is, when we talk about emotion regulation, if you are around some toxicity and you can avoid it, that's the very first strategy. That's situation selection. If it doesn't have to do with the teammate or anything, but if you can avoid toxic situations that will create negative emotions, be proactive. Don't put yourselves in situations that will drain you if you can. Okay, be proactive. You have to take care of yourselves. And also, as coach said, don't be those that other people are trying to avoid. Okay, don't create those situations that are toxic for others, especially in a team setting. I will tell you right now, and that goes along, coach, with what you said. The majority of people, all research shows that you want to be led by optimistic people. Facts, science, right? Be optimistic. Don't be pessimistic, especially in a team setting. People may look at you when something happens. They want to be led by you. Be optimistic. Everybody wants to be led by an optimistic person. And that goes to the coaches as well. You can't have a coach who's pessimistic. How would that work? Okay, so yeah, that was my comment. Thanks, coach. Anything else? I have 2 more minutes before we finish this and move on to our second link. Have you already shared it, Lisa, in the chat room?
I have not. I will right now, though.
Thank you. If you don't have any more questions, we're done with the second part. So now we're going to move to the third part, which is, again, to do the same thing, right? You click on that link, you put your code, and you rate your knowledge, and you assess your levels of optimism and emotion regulation. If we're ready, I'll give you 2 minutes. You don't need more than 2 minutes. It's 4 questions, plus you put the code in the very beginning. 4 questions. Excuse me, again, from 1 to 7. Okay, so it's 54. Let's go until 56. All right, if you have any issues, just let us know. Thank you. I appreciate you. I can see your comments in the chat room. It's always an honor to be here and helping our student athletes. So I always appreciate the opportunity. Always. Thank you. Again, if any coach or athlete or staff would like to contact me, at the very last slide, I will share my contact info, and I will be more than happy to start a conversation with anybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your comments. All right. If you don't have any issues, I'm going to go ahead and So we're done with this. This is my last slide, which again has my email address and my IG handle. Let's connect. If you need anything, I'll be more than happy. Shoot me an email, send me a message. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your attention for a whole hour. I hope you found it useful. I'm always excited to get some feedback, especially if it's negative and I can do it better the next time. As the last thing, I want to say Happy New Year. I hope you're safe, and I'll see you soon. So stay safe and stay active. Thank you, guys.
Andreas, from everyone tonight, we want to thank you for presenting and willing to work with our athletes. Our next session for everybody with Dr. Stamatis is going to be February 23rd at 5 p.m. I want to thank you all for participating, and I hope everybody has a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody.